A site like the Bee is the perfect entity to push back and fight this battle. If they try to shut us down, bring it on. Let's take this all the way to the Supreme Court if we have to.
How did you get to start the Babylon Bee?
It was not really like a business yet. Two guys in a garage banging out articles. There's got to be a hunger for good comedy that doesn't always prop up the leftist narrative.
How long were you in Twitter jail?
8 months, shared a cell with Donald Trump.
What is it like getting a phone call from Elon Musk?
Well, first you question whether it's real. He joked at the end of that conversation that, he might just need to buy Twitter. We don't really believe you. You must be kidding, right?
Seth, last time we spoke, you were heading back from a Trump rally. I remember you were so excited because you spoke to Christians and you were motivating them to go ahead and vote.
Trying anyway.
Or at least, well, I think you tried pretty well. I mean, I don't know that I can give you all the credit, but Trump did pretty well with Christians.
Yeah. Funny that I was asked to do that because I'm not, if you see me do public speaking, I'm not like a rally speaker. I'm not the guy who's going in there and getting everybody fired up, I do fine. I like to talk, but that was outside my comfort zone, way outside my comfort zone. It was exciting, though. It was fun to get in front of a crowd that big. I took a selfie with everybody behind me. But yeah, I was trying. That was what I was brought there to do. Charlie asked me to come there and try to urge Christians to get off their butts, stop being apathetic, and vote. Vote on the basis of policy. If you don't like the person, support the policies that the person is adopting and promoting. That's important. We have to actually care about what happens in the culture. We have to care about policy because it affects people. And so as Christians, we should be concerned with that. So I tried to hammer that point home. Hopefully it was successful. I mean, we do have a good result, so that's good. I do not take credit for that, but it was fun to be a part of it.
It's funny that you say that you went out of your comfort zone because I think a lot of people did that actually over the past few months. People have just done so much to support this movement of saving America. And when you talk about who we elect for president, I know one of the things that Christians were very critical of is how could a father like you, we're just talking about how you have boys, right? You have kids, and how could you tell them to vote for somebody who is not the perfect role model, right? Wasn't that mostly what Christians were upset about Donald Trump and being, an elected president?
Well, the top two reasons, according to a survey that Barna put out, why Christians weren't voting or were unlikely to vote is the response in the survey was disinterest in politics. That was really number one. And then second to that was dislike of the candidates on both sides, just no candidate that they felt represented them and their values. Mm-hmm. So those were the top two reasons. And I think for the reason I already gave, disinterest in politics, I think is inexcusable. I think it's a really bad reason to, disengage, because why would you not care about politics? It's not like I don't love politics. I hate politics, but I still have to care about it because policy affects people. So if you actually care about your neighbor, if the Christian principle, the Christian value of loving your neighbor means you want to act in their best interest, you care about what actually happens to them and how they're impacted by these policies. And so I don't think Christians should be disengaged just because they're disinterested or they have distaste for politics. And I don't think they should be disengaged just because they have distaste for a personality. I think policy matters infinitely more than personality.
If people just change the word politics to doing your civic duty, which is basically the same thing, I think people would look at it a lot differently, right? I don't really care about my civic duty. That sounds pretty bad, right? But ultimately, they did come out. 63% of Christians ended up voting for Trump. I believe it was something around 58% of Catholics voted for Trump. And so despite all the, I don't know if you would call it propaganda or concern that Christians are not going to be voting for Republicans this time around, they ended up coming out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they did show up in large enough numbers. I still think there were a lot that sat out and that should have been engaged. And it's not, civic duty is, we have the right to vote. We do, I think, have a duty as citizens to vote. I think the duty gets even stronger for Christians. It's not just that if you're religious in general, not just from a Christian standpoint, but morally, we're dealing with a moral, cultural battle right now. You have these horrible ideologies that are being imposed on us, especially children. And if you're disengaged from the political process, you're just allowing that to take over. You're ceding all of that territory to people who hate not just your values, but want bad things to happen to your posterity. And I don't know how you can disengage with that as a person with religious values or Christian values and just say, hey, I may have a civic duty or whatever, but my Christian values are causing me to withhold from this process. I think if anything, they should motivate us to get involved in the process and want to actually do something about what we see going on in the culture.
Yeah. What do you think the impact that Elon Musk getting involved with the campaign had on this election?
Probably immeasurable, if I'm being honest. I mean, Elon, people can't help but pay attention to what he says and what he does, because he's just like, first of all, he's incredibly intelligent, maybe even more accomplished than he is intelligent. And so you can't look away and not pay attention to what he says and what he does. He attracts attention from people who practically worship the ground he walks on, and he attracts all this attention from people who think that he's, the worst villain next to Trump. Maybe he's public enemy number 2 next to Trump at this point. But the large platform that he has and the way that he engages, what he was telling somebody in an interview recently was that he's, he doesn't deal in half measures. If he wants to get something done, he goes all in on it.
He definitely went all in on Trump.
He went all in hard on Trump. And I don't think anybody, even people that know him, like I've known him personally for a few years, and I wasn't expecting that. There was no way to really expect. He went from kind of being like this, where am I politically? Because the left has gone so far left, I feel like they've left me. And so I'm like, he'll post that meme, where it shows the people that are in kind of the center, like they're still in the center.
Yeah.
And it looks like they're on the right because people on the left have gone so far left. And that's, he's identified as that person. To go from there, though, to being all in on Trump is a whole different story. That's a much further extent that he's taken it to. But, for him, he saw a lot of these things as being moral issues. He saw them as being issues that dealt with, constitutional rights and the trampling of those rights, the right to speak freely, the right to push back on bad ideas, including woke, radical gender ideology, stuff that's affected him personally with his own kids.
Right.
These things really mattered to him. And so I think a lot of that was part of the motivation for him to actually get much more vocal about these things, beyond just that he's safeguarding his own interests, his business and, his livelihood and the things that he has going on that he wants to accomplish. He's safeguarding that. But more fundamentally, he's trying to safeguard values that we really should, as Americans, care about. And he did it with passion and I think honesty. And I think he impacted a lot. I mean, he was going and doing these town halls all over Pennsylvania, which Trump ended up winning. He invested a lot of money in it. He put his money where his mouth was. So I don't think you can overstate the impact that he had on the election. And it wasn't because this is what the critics will say. He took over Twitter, turned it into X, and then used it to spew misinformation and to, silence dissent and all that. It wasn't because he got in there and rigged the system. He got in there and spoke and promoted the ideas that he wanted to see prevail. And that's part of the democratic process. So he actually allowed more people to speak and allowed for more debate, which I think allowed these issues to get out there in the open. And he also allowed for, with the free speech on X, and now the community notes and all these things that are used to fact check the narratives that the media tries to put out there and safeguard before, the election happens. He disrupted that whole system. And so he allowed for more debate and discussion. He didn't stifle it, and he engaged in it himself. And so you combine those two things together, the impact is immeasurable.
Well, I think also him endorsing Trump had a complete impact on the culture, because we used to be called deplorables or stupid or uneducated. Nobody can call Elon Musk stupid or uneducated.
They try.
But they try. But they look, it's like when they call me a white Christian nationalist Barbie, or they call you a Zionist Jew or whatever.
Right.
Like it's stupid, right? Like
they look foolish when they do that.
Foolish, right?
When he lands a rocket on a floating pad in the ocean, or the rocket comes in and gets caught by those little chopstick arms, it descends from the sky. It's a 20-story building descending from the sky, and he catches it. Of course, he's got teams of engineers working on these things, but this is his vision come to life. To call him stupid is just
it's so absurd. And I think that was another wake up. It was kind of last minute, but last minute, Joe Rogan came in and also endorsed Donald Trump and had that very long interview with Donald Trump. I'm curious, do you think that had an impact, or is it just kind of like too late?
It came at the last minute, but I will say just real quick about the culture thing, making some progress on the culture. It's a combination of things. I think there's a lot of people speaking out that are having an impact on that, and Elon is certainly one of them. But he was pushed away by the overreach and the extremism and the lunacy of the left. And so in a lot of ways, this was much more than it was like, oh, well, we're notching victories in the culture war by advancing these ideas and beating them back. No, they are self-defeating. Mm-hmm. They are really hurting themselves and driving people away. And Rogan is actually an excellent example of that, because Rogan, I think, was more vocally on the left than Elon was. I think Elon kept a lot of his politics to himself, but considered himself, he only voted for Democrats and was like socially liberal and all those things. Rogan was like, he's a Bernie guy, and he voted for Obama, and he was outspokenly a Democrat on the left, solidly on the left. Yeah. And over the years, he's had more and more conservative guests on, and he's explored a lot of these ideas, and he's spoken out a lot about the men and women's sports and issues like that he just saw as being such radical overreach and insanity, lunacy that's trying to be mainstreamed, that it pushed him away. And so that culture shift is, in my perspective, largely due to the left and the way that they have mistakenly allowed the tail to wag the dog, like the extremists on the fringe took control of every institution and started propagating this stuff everywhere. And they went along with it. And it ended up infecting like a disease the entire Democratic platform. Yeah. And it made them politically toxic. Rogan's interview, I think, and his endorsement that came right on the heels, he interviewed Trump for one thing, which was huge. He doesn't really do that with Canada. He then interviewed J.D. Vance, and then he offered an interview to Harris, and she didn't show. And good for her that she didn't actually, because it would have been even worse. I think if she'd gone on his show. You think
she'd get even fewer votes?
Yeah, she would not. Joe is so good. I've done Joe's show. And he's so good at when you start to say something and you make a claim and you're not even thinking about defending that claim in the moment. You're just saying it as part of whatever point you're trying to make. He'll stop you and ask you about that claim and start digging in on it. Yeah. And then you have to defend it in real time in front of 14 million people. And he can make you kind of squirm and get uncomfortable and be defensive very easily. He's good at that. Yeah. And he wants to understand where you're coming from and why you're coming from that position. If he had done that to Kamala Harris, it would have been brutal.
So I guess her team just knew that.
She doesn't have teleprompters there, showing her what to say. She's got to think on her feet. It would have been a mess. Yeah. And so the fact that she didn't show that Trump did and did well, and then, he did that Elon interview. That was a surprise thing. Elon was actually going to do like a town hall on X and then canceled it to do Rogan's show and release that episode like same day. And then he endorsed him. I think there are a lot of people who listen. Celebrity endorsements are generally worthless, and I think they were definitely demonstrably worthless for Harris. But Joe's a little bit different because he's a commentator who kind of thinks through these issues and has an audience that's not really a right-wing audience. And so he's talking to people as someone who used to be on the left as a Democrat and explaining now and allowing people to make a case for why we should leave that behind and go a different way. I think that's kind of powerful. So it probably did have an impact.
I think that there's a difference between the celebrity endorsements that we're looking at, where it's Taylor Swift or Beyonce, where it feels very transactional and expected. It feels like somebody in the Democratic campaign is writing a check or making some backstage deal with Beyonce to say this or to say that. It feels inauthentic. It feels like Hollywood is yet again the political ATM of the Democratic Party. In the case of Joe Rogan, especially Joe Rogan, but also people like Tulsi Gabbard and Elon Musk, it feels like we have been following them in their journey, right? You're hearing these conversations that they're having with different people, exploring different ideas, experiencing what it is that most of us as Americans are experiencing, and then talking about it. And so it's not necessarily about them being celebrities. It's about how many people are following them and going through very similar things that they're going through, right? We're all seeing our kids' lives being jeopardized by this, gender-affirming care, absolute radical craziness, or the crime in our cities. And he's talking about this stuff for months and months and months. And so we're following him. And ultimately, he's making these conclusions that I think many of us normals are concluding as well. But because the culture makes it taboo to actually say it out loud. When they say it out loud, that's where the shift in the culture has been made. And I think that's why it's been so significant, because many of my friends are thinking these things, but they are so used to being attacked for saying these things out loud that when you have somebody like Joe Rogan or Elon Musk or Tulsi Gabbard just go and yell it out and say, this is what I know to be true, now everybody else is saying, yeah.
Well, it's resistance. It's a conversion story. They're converting from one previous viewpoint to another, which is, causes people to pay attention. It's a lot of the Democrat celebrities that support Democrats. It's expected, of course they're going to do that. And it does feel very transactional and potentially inauthentic. It's just something that they're trying to do to advance their own cause. And when somebody parts ways and comes out of lockstep with that powerful machine and boldly and loudly says, no, this can't go on. We need to go in a different direction. It's the courage is contagious kind of thing where a lot of the people that you're talking about who are maybe keeping their views to themselves are thinking these things, but should they say them? And are they right? Are we crazy for thinking that
am I alone?
Yeah. Am I alone? Am I crazy for thinking that men are different from women and can't switch back and forth between the two? Am I the one who's crazy? We start to question our own sanity when this is all pushed on us. And then when you have trusted voices or people who have kind of gone through that journey that you're describing, say, no, you're not crazy. They're crazy.
Yeah,
and I'm not going to be crazy with them any longer. That is impactful. It's definitely impactful.
Yeah. The other thing I really wanted to talk to you about, honestly, is how scary this has been for us. Because I think that many of us who have been in the liberty movement have been legitimately scared that if the left continues to basically dominate all the institutions, they will truly come after us. And I don't think it's an exaggeration. And this is no attempt to, fearmonger, but what you went through, even just with Twitter, that first time around, how long were you in Twitter jail?
8 months, approximately.
I remember it being an incredible amount of time. And we
shared a cell with Donald Trump.
I mean, PragerU has been in Twitter jail, but we're in and out. We make a whole ruckus around it. And so then they're, oh, never mind. Well, and I think that if you agree to remove the post, then they'll let you out.
Yeah,
but
we were really in Twitter jail by choice in that case because they wanted us to censor ourselves and take down a post that we stood by.
And most people will take down the post. I admit that we sometimes do that too because we want to then continue doing our work. But you didn't. You kept your post up.
It's a tough choice to make. Well, there were two difficult decisions. The first decision was, do we tell for context so people know what we're talking about? There was a story that came out in USA Today about how Rachel Levine was named Woman of the Year. And Rachel Levine is this transgender health admiral. It's a male person with a wig on, or I don't know, maybe just his own long hair. I don't know. But you've got this absurd story you see, and it feels like satire. It feels like it's straight out of a South Park episode, but it's real. This is in, FoxNews.com reporting this. And you look at that and you're like, well, first of all, how do you satirize that? And then we couldn't. Satire relies so much on caricature, kind of drawing out and exaggerating something that's true. You take it a step further. You can't do that with a story like that. There's no way to make it more absurd than it is.
Reality is more absurd than the Babylon Bee.
Exactly. Nobody would have believed you 30 years ago if you told them that a Woman of the Year was going to be a man. They wouldn't have even been able to comprehend, what are you talking about? Why would anyone ever do that? And why would anyone take it seriously? Well, we do take it seriously because it's become so normal now that we see these things. But we decided we can't really exaggerate this. So the headline that we came up with as our joke on the back of this ridiculous, headline was the Babylon Bee's Man of the Year is Rachel Levine. So we named Rachel Levine our pick for Man of the Year. And of course, that's provocative, and it's according to the standards of Twitter at the time, not any longer, thankfully. But at the time, it was considered misgendering, which falls under the hateful conduct policy, which is so ridiculous. The USA Today piece misgendered by calling, a man a woman. But by telling that joke, we had an internal debate. Do we tell this joke? Should we put this joke out there? Because if we do, then we might end up getting censored. We might end up getting completely deplatformed.
So you knew it might cause some trouble.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, anytime you do that, we knew what the rules were, and we knew that we were violating a rule when we posted it. And we're like, this is really important that there be these kinds of stands that you're willing to take where you say, look, we're not going to play by these rules. And because if everybody just plays by the rules win, and the bad ideology wins, and then the culture loses.
Yeah.
And so at some point there has to be a large number of people. It's got to start somewhere. Somebody has to do it. Somebody has to be willing to say, no, we're gonna post this even if it means there's a consequence, and then we'll deal with that when it comes. And so we hit send tweet and threw it out there. And of course that's when we ended up getting locked, because it was immediately reported by a lot of the trans activists and whoever else got hold of it and reported it for hateful conduct. So we got this message saying that we were locked out of our account and we needed to delete that tweet to get back into our account. And so that was the first decision was, do we tell the joke? And the second decision was, well, now what do we do? Do we take the joke down? And that was where it was really like, okay, if we don't take it down, we can't tweet anymore. And that's like our core business. That is the business. Our business is social media.
And you're not a non-for-profit. You're a for-profit. So you need that traffic.
We need the traffic. Yes. We don't have donors supporting us. Like we need traffic sending people to the website so that we can monetize with ads and hopefully convert some of those people into subscribers. But the reach and engagement and the survival of the business depends on us having a presence on existing social media platforms, the big ones that actually get reach and drive traffic. And so we decided very quickly that the right thing to do would be to refuse to delete the joke, even if it meant it hurt our business. And we just kind of trusted that. We had no idea what was going to happen, but we just trusted that if we did the right thing, maybe circumstances would end up working out in our favor. We'd be rewarded for that. It was just trusting God kind of thing, but also not that we had an expectation of Elon eventually buying Twitter, but maybe we would also embolden other people to do the same thing. Maybe other people would stop deleting their posts and stop censoring themselves, because the refusal to tell the joke in the first place, if we had done that and censored ourselves, that's every bit as bad or worse than the hard censorship where they take your content down. I think it's way worse because it happens way more often. People, they want you thinking in those terms, like, should I say this?
Were they willing to just take your post down?
No. They didn't. They wouldn't take it down. They said your post violates our rules. You have to delete it and admit and check a box admitting that you violated the hateful conduct policy.
Unbelievable.
And we're like, we didn't engage in hateful conduct. It's not hateful to refer to a man as a man.
So you're like, you take it down if you want to take it down.
Yes. And so that was the stalemate. And of course, Twitter, we appealed and whatever, and they rejected our appeal. And they're not going to take it down. Why would they? They're like, we just got rid of the Babylon Bee. That's good for us, right? They're traffickers and misinformation. So we left ourselves in Twitter jail. And it wasn't...
weren't you having these conversations internally saying, well, month 1, month 2, month 3, month 4, we're not there. We're not on Twitter.
No,
we're not making the impact we want to be. You didn't know that Elon Musk is going to buy Twitter.
I knew that would happen. So I headed it off by posting my own statement saying, we refuse to delete this joke. We stand by it. For one thing, it's a joke. For another thing, it's true. The truth is not hate speech. We're not taking it down. So I said that publicly and went viral. And so I did it on purpose. I wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to leave myself that escape. If we had at some point popped back onto Twitter 3 months later, everyone would be like, this guy's he's a clown. He's a hypocrite. He went back on his, like, he doesn't have any principles. He did that for the publicity, and now he really wants the traffic. I did it in large part to hold us accountable so that we wouldn't do that. And that meant, as far as we knew, we would figure out something else. We'd find other ways to generate traffic. We did have this crazy spike in new followers and traffic to the website and people subscribing, and that lasted for like a few days and then it petered off. And so, yes, 3 months down the road, we're like, we don't have Twitter anymore. This hurts. So, but it was only like 2 days after that happened that when we were locked out initially, that we got a message from Elon Musk. He DM'd us and he was like, are you guys locked out of Twitter? Is that true? Are you suspended? And we couldn't respond to him because we were locked out. Like, we could read the message, but we couldn't reply. You can't post a reply.
I can't even imagine.
So we're like, we need to get in touch with Elon Musk, and I don't know how to do that. So we didn't respond to his message because we couldn't. And then he found our number, dug it up from somebody, and called and had a conversation with us about it.
What is it like getting a phone call from Elon Musk?
Well, first you question whether it's real.
Yeah, did you think it was a prank?
Yeah, is this really Elon? You sound like Elon Musk. Are you really? How do you test him to determine whether or not it's really Elon Musk on the other end of the line? But yeah, he was just he couldn't believe it. He's like, comedy should be legal. You should be able to tell jokes like this. It's not that he necessarily agreed with the joke and thought that it was a good joke. It was the principle of the matter that we should be allowed to tell the joke, and that we shouldn't have this kind of censorship. And so he joked at the end of that conversation that, he might just need to buy Twitter. And of course, it was, we interpreted it as, yeah, haha, that's great. Way to make us feel like there is hope, but we don't really believe you. You must be kidding, right? So when it actually became clear that he was making moves to acquire the platform, we were, of course, just, cheering as loud as we could from the sidelines, like, please let this go through. Because we knew that if he took over the platform, he would unlock us.
So how long after Elon Musk took over Twitter, you were freed?
He wanted to do it on day one. So day one, he walked into Twitter with that sink in his hands, let that sink in, that famous moment. And in the first thing he did, he messaged me and he said, do you want the bee restored? There will be no censorship of humor. And so that was day one as CEO. He sent me that message. However, he did get a lot of pushback internally. So he was almost like a little bit prematurely reaching out to me personally before he had actually gone and talked to the people about, like,
I
go
love
set the
that
bee
about
free.
him, by the way. It's like the perfect CEO that forgets that there is an HR department,
doesn't care about
processes.
Yeah, exactly.
So ideal.
Yeah, he's like, no, I'm just doing this. This is what I want to do. It's my company now. I'm going to do what I want. I'm bringing back the Babylon Bee. And then he sat down, like, I think the Washington Post did a write-up on it. He was sitting down with, like, the trust and safety team, and they were telling him, look, you can't do that. You can't just break the rules. Change the rules first. If you want to have different rules, change them and then go through that process. But, like, if you make an exception for the Babylon Bee, then it's like, why? Then everybody else will question why you're not making an exception for them. It creates problems. You have to go through procedures. And so it was like, all right, he's not unlocking us yet. What's going on? And he said, just give me time because I got to work through some of these things. So it was a process that he went through where eventually, though, he got fed up with it because these people were like, Yoel Roth, I think, is the guy that was heading trust and safety. He eventually was exited. I think it took like a month or two before he ditched that guy and just said, I'm bringing back, I think it was the Babylon Bee, Jordan Peterson, and Kathy Griffin. Those three randomly, all on the same day.
It's a nice little balance.
Yeah. And then from that point forward, it was like every week, what was he calling it? Like, what was the name he gave it? Forgiveness Fridays or something like that? No, it was something like that. He made up some phrase for, like, when he would pardon people. And, like, every week he was, like, pardoning new accounts and unlocking these accounts. And so, but it was probably about a month or two after he took over that he actually did unlock the bee. And then we tweeted, we're back, let that sink in.
So many people feel like now X is too open and there is so much hate speech and it's just a cesspool, or that, it foments all kinds of anger, etc. How do you feel about how it's managed now?
Well, there's definitely a lot of things that you're permitted to say now that you weren't permitted to say before. And a lot of it is very nasty. I mean, you're on the receiving end of it. I'm on the receiving end of it. We see it all the time. As far as how problematic that is, I mean, obviously the advertisers care about that a lot. They don't want their ads showing next to a lot of that content. And that's been a very tricky thing for them to navigate because they want these advertisers back. They have so many advertisers boycotting and they want them back. But with the discourse itself, well, it's opened up. This is one of the challenges of free speech, is the free speech has two sides to it. The very positive aspect of it is that it allows us to actually engage in debate and get somewhere by talking to each other and allowing ideas to clash head to head and let the best ideas win, right? That's the positive of free speech. And the negative is that people can abuse it and say really mean and nasty things. But as uncomfortable and awful and reprehensible as a lot of it is, people do have a right to say terrible things. And you and I don't have to listen to them, or, we can block whoever we want, mute whoever we want. We can kind of control that ourselves. We can ignore it and not let it bother us. The idea that because people are saying mean things means that they need to have their voice taken away is a very un-American idea, I think. And when it comes to hate speech, which I hate the phrase hate speech. It's so subjective what people consider hateful. A lot of the jokes that we tell are considered hate speech by the left, and we don't consider it hate speech. Well, who's to decide whether or not it's a violation and shouldn't be allowed? Like that, right. You get into all those tricky areas too. And so for the most part, I think, with the exception of things, and this was really Elon's position too. I don't know if it's changed since he took over, but his position initially was, if it's lawful, if the law allows you to say, you can say terrible things. I can call you names and put you down, but I can't threaten your life. Mm-hmm. I can't say you should go kill yourself or something horrible like that.
Or
incite violence. Call for it explicitly. You might say something. The way that the left treats incitement, they'll say that if you just merely criticize somebody too harshly or draw attention to something they don't want, they consider that incitement. No, that's not incitement. Or hurt their feelings. Incitement's when you actually call for something to happen and you're actually prompting other people, the people who are following you and listening in, to do something and take some action. Those types of things I don't think should be permitted, for the same reason they're not permitted under the law, because they lead to, violence and destruction. But the mean stuff, that's part of free. It's just like free will, like we have the gift of free will, which means that we can use it for good or we can use it for bad. God gives us all kinds of freedom. Like you and I could do whatever we wanted with our lives. We could be a Mother Teresa, or we could be, a gang member who, murders and rapes people, and that's our choice. And it's horrible, and there should be consequences for those kinds of actions. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to, speech, it's the same kind of thing. It's you have the freedom to be able to speak is a beautiful thing, and there are good things that come from it. And you have to be willing to take the bad with it and deal with it in a way that adults deal with those kinds of things, which is you tune out, you don't pay attention, you block them, or you refute their bad ideas with your own good speech. You respond to it in that way.
Yeah. Living in a country that allows for free speech is such a gift. Mm. But as you say, it really does require perseverance. And I feel like the whole world is watching us as Americans to see how we handle free speech, because it's unique to us, freedom of speech, at least at the level that we have it here. And so you have the whole world pointing at us and saying, you see, Americans have too much free speech. Right. Or they'll say, you see, this is incredible. You have all this free speech. And so you're able to go beyond the corrupt institutions and actually get the knowledge and vote for who you want, right? Without freedom of speech, who knows if Donald Trump would have been able to get elected, because all you would hear would have been just lies, right? And so it is so unique to us.
And people are allowed to lie, by the way. That's the thing, is if somebody does lie, there's no law against lying, and while there can be harm done by lies, the response to somebody who's the word that they love to use is either disinformation or misinformation, right? If someone says something misinformative and it's false, then you respond by refuting that. You don't take their voice away.
Right.
I made a statement in response to something. I guess it was Obama was on stage repeating the both sides. There are good people on both sides lie, which you guys have a great video debunking. He repeated that lie. And I quote tweeted that and said, if Democrats did away with misinformation, they wouldn't be able to give speeches anymore. They wouldn't be allowed to, because all they do is spew misinformation.
This is true.
It's, the standard, if applied to them, would silence them completely.
Right.
And so you have to allow for, sure, they can lie. Go ahead, lie. Tell that lie over and over again, and we will refute the lie with the truth.
Right.
And the truth will win out.
Well, even on our side, I think we have gone very comfortable with just saying, oh, you're censoring someone when you're just disagreeing with someone, right? Mm-hmm. And so you'll have somebody even on the right who will say something that we disagree with. And when you disagree with them publicly, people will misuse the word censorship. I mean, there's a difference between censorship and saying,
what, I'm not allowed to say this? I'm not allowed?
Yeah.
No, you're allowed to say it, and I'm allowed to respond to you. That's called discourse.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, that's part of robbing words of their true meaning. Everybody just gets really confused about things.
Yeah. So, genocide, censorship. We use these words and we're stretching their meaning just to apply to things that we don't like.
Yeah.
And that's irresponsible for a number of reasons. For one thing, it's dishonest. And for another thing, it actually downplays what those words are actually meant to apply to.
Yeah.
And it's just like when you call everything racist, nothing is racist.
Right, or everything is anti-Semitism, or everybody is a Nazi. No, it doesn't mean anything.
It doesn't mean anything at all. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I can't believe they're doubling down on that, by the way. The Hitler and Nazi stuff, like even after this, he gets elected again.
Yeah.
And they're still right now
Yeah.
just ramping up how much, now Hitler's in power, you know? And
22% of Jews voted for
I know,
for
yeah.
Donald Trump.
I
And,
saw there
you
was
know,
one state, I'm trying to remember which one it was. It may have been Nevada or something. It was like the Jewish population that voted for Trump doubled
yeah.
from like 22% to like 42%.
Yeah. It's just very confused Jews,
Very-
I guess.
yeah, very strange, yeah.
confused Jews on both sides, right?
Self-loathing Jews.
There's a new Babylon Bee post for you. By the way, how
That's
did
wild.
you get to start the Babylon Bee? Where did this whole concept come from?
I wish I had started it. I wish I had. I took it over in 2018 when it was 2 years old. It was started by a guy named Adam Ford in 2016. So, right in the mess of that whole election.
Oh, yeah.
So it was actually a great time to start a satire site because, everybody was talking about political stuff. And so it launched, Adam started it just with this idea that there needed to be something as an answer to the fact that so much of the media and entertainment and comedy in particular is just owned by the left for some reason. And why is that? Why is there nobody? There's got to be a hunger for and demand for good comedy that doesn't always prop up the leftist narrative. Like, how is there not anybody filling that space? And so that was the question that he tried to answer by launching the site and say, well, maybe there is a demand for this. And if I start this site, it might generate some traction and it could be fun. And it was getting millions of visits within the first few months.
Oh, so it was doing
took
well.
off immediately. Yeah.
Okay.
It wasn't making any money when I took it over. It was not really like a business yet. There were a couple of contractors on the books. It was just, two guys in a, garage banging out articles and no revenue to speak of, really. We had Google ads on the site. And that was one of the things. Like Adam, when Adam handed the site off to me, censorship was his major concern. Like we were starting to get fact checked at that point. The site was 2 years old. A lot of the articles had gone viral. And the one that has the initial one that really got the first threat from one of these social media platforms saying you're going to be deplatformed if you keep doing this was this stupid joke that we posted about how CNN had purchased an industrial-sized washing machine to spin the news in before publishing it. And it's like it's just obviously a joke because it doesn't even make any sense. You can't spin the news in a washing machine. And Facebook was working with third-party fact checkers because they had been blamed basically for Trump getting elected by allowing misinformation to spread. Remember?
Yes.
So they started working with these fact checkers. They had Snopes on the books, as one of their objective third-party fact checkers. And they were rating our jokes false and sending us these threatening warnings saying that we wouldn't be able to continue pushing fake news. And we're like, but that's what satire is. It's funny fake news. Like, that's what we do. And you're not doing this to The Onion. Why are you singling us out, So, but that terrified him because we had, at the time, and this goes back to the business model of how the Bee is run, we post the articles on Facebook. Back then, Facebook drove crazy traffic. I don't know how it was for you guys back then, but 2017, 2018, we drove a lot of traffic. Our articles would go viral and get tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of shares very quickly and drive massive amounts of traffic to the site where the site would crash. And so with these fact checkers rating our stuff false and getting threatened with that, we needed the traffic because the only way we were generating revenue was with Google ads on the site. So it was Facebook and Google. We depended on them for the business. And Adam was like, this doesn't work. This is going to die. It's going to go away.
He thought it would only get worse.
He thought it would only get
right.
Yeah. To some extent, he was right. But he was like, it's only going to get worse. And this is going to end up getting shut down. So I might as well sell it, before it gets shut down. He's like, I'm going to cash out now. And I'm like, well, if it's going to get shut down soon, give me a discount.
Is that a hobby of yours to buy dying businesses?
No. So that's a great question. My perspective on this, I don't know why I was so optimistic because I had nothing to base it on. But my perspective was, this is comedy and people love it. And I think that if they're going to try to censor us, if they're really going to go to war with us, and we can bring some more resources to this fight and fight back, I think we can win this fight. So I saw it as somebody needs to, a site like the Bee is the perfect entity to push back and fight this battle. And I saw that as being an exciting opportunity. I'm like, if they try to shut us down, go for it, bring it on. Like, let's have that fight, and let's take this all the way to the Supreme Court if we have to. You know, that was kind of my mentality on the whole thing. And my brother, who's also my business partner, I have to be careful about introducing him as my partner because I did that with our tenant one time, and they thought we were gay lovers. But my business partner and brother, he has a very different outlook on the whole thing, and he was like, look, they should be paying us to take this thing over. This is going to die, you know, like this is a high risk situation. So he saw it totally differently than he saw it much more like Adam did. But I dragged him into it. I was like, no, we got to do this. This is going to be fun, and even the fight will be fun. And so against probably my better judgment, we did a deal in March of 2018. Yeah.
Was there a moment where you're like, okay, brother, we're making money now? No, I told you so. Yeah, I'm like, come on.
I mean, it was always uncertain. So even when, like, the more we started to make, the more revenue we started to generate, the more traffic and the bigger our audience started to get, the more there was that fear of, you know, now we have something that's very successful and it will sting a lot if this gets taken, you know, if this gets shut down, that's a much bigger deal than it was before. Back then, it wasn't really making any money. If it gets shut down, it's not like we lost a massive revenue stream.
And you have all these employees now.
Right.
Like 50 employees.
Exactly. You have a bunch of people working for you. You know, it's their livelihood. And so the bigger it got, the more, you know, nerve-wracking that whole thing was. Initially, it was just kind of like, well, this is exciting. And then it was like, well, this is kind of scary, because it only continued from there. You know, we had the New York Times starting to write pieces about how we were trafficking in misinformation under the guise of satire. And that narrative, they were trying to make that stick to us so that they could justify deplatforming us entirely.
Right-wing extremist, Christian nationalists.
Right. They weren't just misunderstanding what they knew we were a satirical site. But they also knew that if they could label us that way, then, you know, we wouldn't be able to get advertising revenue. We wouldn't be able to be on these social media platforms. They could just wipe us out.
And they knew that you were having an impact on culture, which was an area where they were never threatened before.
Right. Exactly. So they've done that, you know, they've done that with you guys, Daily Wire, with us, you know, like anybody who's got that kind of reach and impact, that's what they set their sights on, to try to, you know, do everything they can. It's what they're doing with Elon Musk. Hardcore, you know, they've set their sights on him to try to shut him down and find ways to shut down his businesses or pull all the advertising money away from Twitter so that it goes bankrupt and he has to, you know, fold the whole operation. They will, by whatever legal means they can, and sometimes illegal means, do everything they can to try to take the rug out from underneath you. So it got a little bit more scary as we got bigger.
How do you feel about prophecies? I mean, it's so crazy. Sometimes I look at the posts that you have and it's like, oh my God, are you reading into the future? A week later, exactly what you thought you made up as something never possible actually becomes reality. I mean, how does that come to you? You just are able to read? Are you able to just read the future? Is that being the son of son of a preacher kind of a thing?
It's the trick to the prophecy stuff is if you look at what on any given day, and maybe this is oversimplifying a little bit because satire is difficult to write, but on any given day, if you look at like whatever Democrats are doing, you can kind of see where it's going. Like, what would be the next logical step from here? Like, what would be even more outlandish? They're probably going to do that soon. We're not writing it with the intention of predicting what they're going to do, but because of how satire works, where you're exaggerating the truth to make your point, you inevitably end up doing that because you're taking you know, a group of people, or, you know, if I'm focusing on Democrats specifically, the types of ideas that they're advancing and the types of policy positions that they're taking, the insane things that they're doing. Like, for example, when riots break out and they call for abolishing the police, which is just like the most insane reaction to, you know, violence. It's like, oh, we need fewer police when there's more violence. Like, what are you talking about? When they're doing these kinds of things, anytime you try to exaggerate what they've said or done, there's a good likelihood that if they keep going on that trajectory, they're going to bump up against the satire. And it happens sometimes within hours, weeks, months. Sometimes it takes 2 or 3 years. But eventually, what was a joke at this point in time becomes reality at this point in time. And on the one hand, that's funny. I think it's funny. On the other hand, it's scary because you don't want to live in a world that is indistinguishable from satire.
Yes.
It's not a healthy place to be in where you can't tell what's real. And that's exactly what that Rachel Levine joke represented.
Mm-hmm.
The headline, first of all, that Rachel Levine was named a Woman of the Year. That's a really good example of something that back here, if when South Park or whatever was making a joke like that back in 1999 or 2004 or whatever, like no one would have ever thought that would come true. And then, you have something like that in the real headlines when you just fast forward a little bit. And that I think, should give us pause. As a society, we should start thinking very carefully about what path we're on when we keep bumping up against satire and making jokes come true.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we're on the wrong track.
Well, so many people are confused by your posts because they don't know what is actually real and what isn't real. I mean, you had something where you were saying, I think you wrote something about CNN demanding the receipts from the devil. I remember that one where I was like, the receipts from the devil that I actually work with the Democrats, and people were actually writing in saying, "Did CNN actually ask for that?"
Yeah. That
right?
was
the New York Times or the CNN?
That was my satirical post on New York, because New York Times had been reaching out to all these
New York
conservatives.
Times.
Yeah, they were writing a hit piece on conservatives, and so they were sending them these messages saying, you posted this video on this date and this video on. So I did like a satirical version of that where they were demanding to know, like, because we had done a video about how Satan had asked the Democrats to tone down all the evil. They were too forward facing with the evil, and so I put words in their mouth, and I was like, do you have evidence and documentation to support that Satan's in direct communication with Democrats? And a lot of people thought that New York Times had actually asked me that question.
Yes, people asked me saying, "Did you get that same letter that
exactly.
Seth Dillon from the Babylon Bee received?"
Yeah.
I'm like, "Which letter?"
Yeah. So I don't blame people when they think that our jokes are real and they get, confused or upset by it. It's, I have a hard time when I see a real headline that looks like satire, I have to check the source. I'm like, is this real? Isn't it? You have to do that double take, and satire intentionally makes you do a double take because it kind of hooks you in with a real sounding headline. And then there's an obvious punchline that you might miss if the world itself is a punchline.
Yep.
So can't blame them.
How often do you get calls from people like me yelling at you for making fun of us? Like, come on, Seth. Come on, that's not funny because it's about me.
I won't name names, but I do get occasional calls and texts from friends. This is the challenge it's one of the challenges of the business that I'm in is, you want to have friendships and relationships with people that are, allies and on the same page as you when it comes to the issues that we all care about, But the problem is because we're not just I've mentioned the Democrats a few times in this conversation, but we don't only make jokes about Democrats. Like, I think it's a very healthy and necessary thing for a comedy site, but even more specifically a satire site, to not really have rules about who you do and don't joke about. You have to be willing to make jokes about people on your own side. Oftentimes it's all in good fun and we're just kind of ribbing on somebody. And then other times there's real criticism there because of some double standard or something that we feel like went too far, was morally wrong. We will make a joke that's targeted at that person, even though they're on our own side. And it's a good thing that we do that. I don't think that we should be hands off and not hold our own side accountable for those things. And when we do that, of course, people get upset. But it's not just like the prominent people, the public figures who are who we target. It's anytime we tell a joke that offends a group of people, like let's say the Catholics or something like that. We'll tell a joke and we'll end up with all these angry emails from Catholics who are like, this joke was, this offended me. You shouldn't have told this joke. Well, you were fine with all the other jokes that we told that offended other people.
I relate to that.
So,
I admit.
So and so we even have a satirical article about that. We have an op-ed, a satirical op-ed, the title of which it's like, I usually like satire, but this time you've gone too far. And sometimes I'll just respond to those people with that article that mocks them for taking satire too seriously. And it's just, sometimes you're going to be, this is how comedy works, is sometimes you're going to be the butt of the joke. Sometimes the comedian on stage picks you out of the crowd and he makes fun of you. And that's just what comedy is. And you have to be willing to laugh at yourself.
Yeah.
You can't take yourself so seriously that you're not willing to be joked about. And if you're off limits, why shouldn't everybody else be off limits? And if everybody else is off limits, comedy's dead. So, we have to allow for that.
I think we should get to a point where if people don't get mocked by the Babylon Bee, they're irrelevant. It should be a badge of honor. I'm about to eat this one for sure. Like, I'm actually afraid to say this, but if I have to be honest about it, I think that one could even be offended if the Babylon Bee does not
make a joke,
right? Because it's like, wait a second, am I not having an impact? Come on.
So wait, do you want us to tell a joke that offends you, or do you want us to not tell jokes about you and then offend you by treating you as irrelevant? Which one? Which one is it? I don't know. Poison. I don't know. I don't know if I can make the decision. Way too stressful. I'm sure we can come up with something to poke at you for.
Just offensive enough, but not to the point. Not to the point that you break my spirit, please. But all fair. I think it's all fair, and I think it makes a lot of sense. And I think it's a great way to engage in civil discourse. And I think that there are so many powers that be that are still fighting you from this, and trying to censor you. And so you're suing here in California, right? Mm-hmm. Which, I sued here in California. It didn't work that well for us because we sued YouTube, mm-hmm. and YouTube basically owns everything. And so I'm curious about your lawsuit and how's that going?
Hopefully there will be, new decisions that have impacts on that, and new precedent that's set so that future suits like that go forward. In our case, we took action in response to Gavin Newsom's commitment to making certain types of parody illegal. So Newsom doesn't like jokes that I think, that personally offend him, just as most people don't, but that undermine what he wants to accomplish. And in this case, when it comes to elections, what he was really targeting was, there was this video. I'm trying to remember the name of the handle that posted it. Something Reagan. Do you know what I'm talking about? There was the
I remember
viral
that
video
going viral,
mocking Kamala Harris.
Right, and it was unclear. It was an AI video, and
AI
so it was unclear
generated.
Whose voice it was.
Exactly.
Right?
AI makes things a little bit tricky,
mm-hmm.
but he actually labeled it as satire. He posted it as a parody video, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it was clearly parody when you actually listened to it, which I realized when I say that a lot of things that Kamala Harris says, you would think, is this real or not? Like you could poll a bunch of people and they'd be like, no, there's no way she actually said that. And she did. So there's, some gray area there where it is sometimes hard to tell what parody is, but it was labeled parody. I think it was obviously parody. There were punchlines there that were clearly jokes. And he responded to that by saying, this should be made illegal. You shouldn't be allowed to do this because this is election interference. This is misinformation. And so they fast-tracked this bill that was really targeting, these kind of deep fake parodies, which take on the likeness or voice of a politician during the time of near bumping up against an election, and saying, you can't do this. If you do this, you have to there's certain rules that you have to follow. And they were ridiculous. It was things like, whatever the largest text is, like, for example, one of our Babylon Bee headlines, we have a large headline in large font and then an image underneath it.
Yep.
Well, the law would require that we have a disclaimer going across the image that's as large as the largest font. And so every bit as big as the headline, we would have to put, this is parody, there's specific language they want you to use. Yeah. It's got to be in a very large font. And if it's a video, that font has to appear throughout the entire video as it plays. And there's a number of problems with this. For one thing, it kills the joke. When you label satire, you ruin it, because satire kind of depends on you doing that double take and being kind of drawn in by it and kind of thinking it's real until you figure out there is a punchline and it's just a joke. That's really the mechanism of satire. So you're killing the mechanism, which kills the joke. You're also compelling speech because you're making people put disclaimers on their content and say things that they don't want to say. We don't want to put disclaimers on our content, and they're compelling you to do that. Plus, they're chilling speech because in this case, if we were to publish something and inadequately put disclaimers on it, or not just, there's something about the law that we don't follow just right, we could get sued and have these penalties and have to pay court costs and all of these things. We would just rather not deal with that. So let's not put out this joke. Let's refrain from posting what we want to post because this might have a cost. So you have the compelled speech, you have the chilled speech, and then you have the ruining of the comedy, and all of those things together. It's like, this is ridiculous. This can't be constitutional. We have to push back on this. So our mutual friends at Alliance Defending Freedom, stepped in, and they were like, we're going to file a lawsuit on your behalf, and we'd love to work with you on this if you want to do that. So we immediately did that, and we did get a positive ruling on that initially from the guy that posted that first Kamala video. He got a ruling from a judge saying that this is unconstitutional. This is limiting speech in a way that's unconstitutional. And so we were able to get the court to agree, because we had filed separately, and we were able to get the court to agree that ruling applied to us as well. And so now we've attached our case to that case. We've moved it to that other system and are now attached to that case, and we have the protection of that ruling on our case. So that was a big victory. It allowed us to continue to just tell the jokes that we wanted to tell leading up to the election without worrying about, Newsom coming after us.
All right. Well, we'll be following it.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens. We talked a little bit earlier about the big tent that we've created, making it into the culture. So many people that we never expected ended up being part of the bigger conservative movement. One of the things I've been, really thinking about a lot is there's been so much criticism of people like us who didn't hold the line on every single issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they got very upset about that. And also we've seen a lot of infighting over the last few months amongst conservatives, not agreeing on everything 100%. And I understand that. I think it was really important. The biggest enemy we have is the enemy that's trying to destroy America. Mm-hmm. But now that conservatives have won, do we evaluate what does it mean to be conservative?
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know. You and I may disagree on this, because I don't know if the right thing, so we needed to win the election. That was very important. And I think most of us recognize that we needed to win. I do know there are a lot of people on the right who refrained from voting and didn't want to be involved in this election, didn't want to see Trump win. And I think that was very foolish. Of course, you have, the David Frenches of the world who are like, to save conservatism, we have to vote for Kamala Harris.
Right.
I don't think that's the way to save conservatism.
Right. Or some Christians and Catholics on the abortion issue.
Exactly.
And, many. Yes.
Yeah. You had people who were like, well, we can't in good conscience do this or whatever. And in these kinds of disagreement, I understand no, shut up and just let's support this guy and get this guy through. But I think it was handled the wrong way by the right. I think that the right way to handle those disagreements, like, for example, when you have pro-lifers who are like, Trump isn't pro-life enough for us. Okay, well, he's definitely more pro-life than Harris. He got Roe overturned. He appointed good judges and got good results. And he's not for abortion on demand without restrictions. He wants it to be a state's issue, and fine. That's where the fight is right now because of the Supreme Court overturning Roe v. Wade. That's where the fight is. So, to say that you can't support Trump for that reason, I don't think is a great reason. But the proper response to that when people are saying that is to persuade them rather than to bully them into silence and submission and say, you just have to get on board or we're going to destroy you.
That's what they did, by the way. Lila Rose. That's what they did to Lila Rose.
What they did
and I thought
Lila.
It was incredibly cruel.
There was a pile-on that happened where, there was this effort to actually damage her reputation and her organization because she wasn't on board. And I'm like, guys, wait a minute. If you want to convince her to support Trump, you're not going to do that by acting like a woke leftist engaging in cancel culture and shaming and bullying. The better thing to do would be to sit down with her and have a conversation with her and persuade her and say, this is why we think that even as someone who, because I personally would like to see abortion abolished. I don't want to see abortion legal in any state, right? But I didn't withhold my vote for Trump over that, because you have to make these decisions based on where you think the best outcome and where the best policy is coming from. And certainly, without question, objectively, Trump is better on that issue than Kamala Harris is. Even if I don't think he's right on some things, he's certainly objectively better than her. And we're in a better position to wage the war that we want to wage on both the cultural level and through the legal channels, legislatively, if Trump isn't in that position of power rather than someone like Harris. And so why not have that conversation and engage in persuasion? And I don't think it's not like, it'd be one thing to say, well, let's have that conversation, but wait till after the election. You could do that, I guess. But I disagreed with the effort to, bully and silence and intimidate rather than persuade. That I don't think is a conservative value. You don't want to have a system where the candidate or the person representing you can just go wherever they want and you have to follow them.
Right.
Like, we're not supposed to be just like tracking them and going wherever they go, because they might stray from principles that we want them to adhere to. And so in a constitutional republic like this, where they're supposed to be representatives of us, they should be listening to us, and we should be vocally expressing what we value and what we think we want to see represented in our leadership. And it's a part of our system that we have both the right and the responsibility to do that. And so the accountability is there for a reason. We should be vocally trying to say, hey, look, like I think a really good example was how we got the pressure that was applied by the pro-life movement on Trump got him to come out and oppose Amendment 4 in Florida, which we had to fight really hard. I live in Florida. Like we fought hard to try to get that amendment defeated, and we barely did. We did, but barely. It had 57% support. It needed 60 to pass. So it was close, but we did beat it. And we did, I think, pressure Trump to come out against it when he was really hesitant to wade into those waters and do that, because so many people were vocal. And that's where it's really necessary that the politicians that are representing us be willing to listen to us, and we be willing to vocalize those things that matter to us and say, this is what we need, this is what we want from you as our representative.
And I think
that's the system.
I think what we're expecting of this new administration, and why so many people voted for them, is because we do believe that they care about what the people want.
Yeah.
Right? This is that administration that we hope will listen to us and not to the big lobbyists, and not to all of the institutions that have taken such a big government type of approach. And so,
but it won't happen if we all just decide, we're just going to go wherever he leads, we're just going to go there. Because, Trump, for all of his strengths, he does sometimes move around on some of these issues. And it's good to have the people anchoring him on and drawing his attention to what matters. Yeah. And he has had a track record of being receptive to that. Yes. And so why stray from that and abandon that just to stay in lockstep with him no matter where he goes?
And it's not, I think, what he's been signaling in this campaign. I think the signal that we've got is that I want to serve the American people, right? And so the American people need to voice what we want. And I think this is our chance right now to just clean up the stuff that we didn't like in Washington right now. And so if we have somebody who's willing to listen to us, I don't think we should be fearful about expressing what do we want, what do we believe, what do we expect of the people who have signed up to serve us.
Trump's a big polls guy. He likes to look at polls numbers, see what people think, and say, this is what the people want. Well, if we don't rise up and represent in large numbers our voice on a particular issue that we care about, then it won't show up to him as something that we care about, that he has to pay attention to. So I think that's how it should work.
Yeah. I'm optimistic that, I think the new people involved are going to deliver that. And I think that's why people really ultimately voted for it, the entire movement, right? It's not Donald Trump, but the entire movement. That's what they voted for. Yeah. For better listening.
Yeah. And but I hope, though, in that listening, what my expectation is and my hope is that he will be aggressive, and that he will, use this opportunity to do everything that he can, because he talks a lot about this, and I'd love to see him get into office and really push hard on these issues and all these day one things that he wants to do. Let's see it happen. I'd love to see it happen. I think people would love that. They would really appreciate that if he takes this opportunity. And I don't know how much his perspective has changed since the assassination attempt, and the way that the extent to which they've gone to try to destroy him and imprison him and even kill him. it has to have changed his perspective on the dramatic importance of doing everything that we can to not only prevent that kind of thing from happening again, but restore sanity and reason and law and order. Like we have to have impartiality in our justice system and enforce the laws that are on the books and, get rid of some of these all of these things. Like it must matter more to him now, you would think, than it did before all of that. It's now deeply personal for him.
Yeah.
This isn't just like, oh, I'm going to run for president and do some things. It's like, no, they're trying so hard to stop him. I hope that motivates and empowers him that he needs to keep going and he needs to actually do not what they fear he will do, which is, rule as Hitler. No one actually, I don't think, believes that we already seen him as president, and that's the crazy thing with the idea that he's going to be that way is like we already had him as president for 4 years.
Yeah, the world was not on fire, and we can actually afford our breadbasket.
Yeah, I would like to see him come out the gates just sprinting and making some moves, some big moves. That would be really encouraging to see for conservatives.
Do you think when Trump's in office and Joe Biden and Kamala are gone, it's going to be harder for you to write satire or easier for you to write satire?
It's a good question. I made a joke recently about how I'm feeling relieved that we're not going to have to think of jokes that are funnier than whatever Kamala is actually saying. She's challenging to satirize, but Trump is too in his own way. Like Trump says crazy things all the time, and you just can't believe it. Like, he doesn't say crazy things that scare me the way that some of the crazy, communist things Kamala says. But he does say outlandish things, and I'll give you a great example of a B headline that we did. We did a Trump joke back in 2019. The headline was Trump, I have done more for Christianity than Jesus, and a lot of people believed that was real because they could see Trump saying something like that. His ego has him saying things like that all the time. And what ended up happening was, of course, it got fact checked because it went viral and a lot of people had believed it was true. And then 2 years later or 3 years later, I think it was 2021, he goes on some radio show and he says he's done more for Christianity and religion in general than any other person in history. And so he actually...
There's your prophecy.
Yeah, exactly. The prophecy fulfilled, right? It had been fact-checked and rated false, but then he went and said it. So we have our challenges with Trump too, because it can be difficult to satirize him sometimes. But we have fun with Trump. I mean, we've done more Trump jokes than probably anything else.
Yeah, and he's like a stand-up comedian, so he gives you a lot of good stuff. He's very
funny himself, and so a lot of the jokes that we do with Trump are in good fun and not harshly critical. But I don't know. I think either way, there will still be comment. You'll still have the hysteric left coming after him the way that they have been. I mean, they're melting down right now, and they're going to do everything in their power to thwart him and come at him. Hopefully, there won't be further attempts on his life, but with some of the language that you see out there, we can probably expect more of that too. But they're going to continue to be hysterical, and so there's still going to be plenty of opportunity to mock and ridicule them.
Yeah. Did you see all the women that are now shaving their heads? The liberal women, as if they're not attractive.
Off the market.
They're so unattractive for their values. They need to match their physical looks to their unattractive values by shaving their heads.
Yeah.
So there's a Babylon Bee for you.
And they're trying to the whole sex strike thing and everything. I'm going to withhold from.
Here we go
because
again.
You didn't vote for like okay. I'm not sure who was trying to get with you, but I don't know. I couldn't imagine being a conservative man interested in women like that, but they're welcome to do what they feel they need to do.
That's right. That's their freedom of expression.
Yeah. That comedy just writes, that's hard to satirize. That's crazy. It's funny.
Yeah. Well, Seth, it was great chatting with you and great having you here at PragerU. Thanks for being a really good friend.
Yeah, thank you. You're a good friend too. It's great to be here.